2 sections left before we have a test. That's today and tomorrow. Monday we'll have a worksheet over 2.7 and 2.8. Tuesday we'll review. Wednesday we'll have a test. So just keep that in mind. That means all of your chapter 2 homework, Mason, will be due next Wednesday. Since we graphed rational functions yesterday, today we're going to remind you how to solve rational functions, which I think is way easier than graphing. It's one of my favorite math things to do because you get to like find common denominators and cancel stuff out, and it's so much fun. I'm being serious. I love it.
But your fun might not be ours.
But it's fun compared to some things. Like, do I think all math is fun? Do I think graphing those rational functions is fun? Not really. It's a pain. But I think this is kind of fun. Maybe not how you like to spend your Saturday night kind of fun, but if you had to choose some math to do, I think this is some math that's fun to do.
Alright. I'll take your word.
This is kind of some straight up algebra. Okay, so we're going to start really simple here, like not really what's on your homework, but just to kind of get the idea across. If you're solving a rational function, you have fractions, the best thing to do is get rid of your fractions, all right? And so I picked a really easy one that you don't really have to get rid of your fractions, but the big idea here is you have to find a common denominator, which you can say is an LCD for the least common denominator, or you can call that a LCM for a least common multiple. And the other big thing is if you have x's in your denominator, you have to check for extraneous solutions because sometimes you get an answer that doesn't work in the actual problem. So we're going to start nice and simple here, okay? Okay, ready? Technically, to solve number 1 here, you could just subtract 2/5, right? Well, you don't have to do this, eliminate the fraction, but I just want to show you that with numbers before we throw x's in there, right? So these are some old notes of how I wrote these fractions. Like with my fancy little fraction button. Like this, I hit this button, and then I hit this. What doesn't? It stands for summation, actually. Apparently it doesn't work. And then look at all this fancy math stuff I can do. But then I can hit this button, and I can make a nice fraction. Whereas this was the old days of Smartboard when I made these notes, because look, I just like underlined it and then entered to the next line and then wrote the number. I should update these. That's right. If you were going to solve this by getting rid of your fraction using the least common denominator, you would say 2 and 5. What would be the first number that 2 and 5 share in common? 10. And so you can multiply everything by your common denominator and you eliminate your fractions, right? Because you can cancel 2 goes into 10 5 times, and you would be left with 15x. 5 goes into 10 2 times, so 2 times 2 would be plus 4, and 5 goes into 10 2 times, and that problem looks a lot easier to solve than that problem. Yes, you multiply every single thing by that common denominator, and whatever's left, you have to multiply by what's there. And then you just solve this. You are going to get some fraction answers, so don't be thrown off by that. But now, this is really simple to solve. I just subtract 4, I divide by 2, and I would get x equals negative 2/15.
See, I was thinking we could multiply this by 5.
Right now, we're crossing out, right?
I got you.
What we're going to do is with rational functions, which means instead of having numbers in the bottom, we're going to have x's, or maybe even like x plus 2, or maybe even a quadratic. So let's look at that. Again, we're starting kind of easy here. It's kind of easy. what would be the common denominator for x plus 2 over 15 equals 15 over x? Just x, right? This right now, this is all over 1. So again, kind of easy. We could just multiply x over, right? Which is exactly what's happening. We could multiply this. Oh, you want to just multiply this side up by x, right? Multiply the x over. Works out the same way because x is your common denominator, right? Because if you multiply this side by x, the x's cancel out. But notice now we're not just going to get a simple problem. I mean, it's kind of simple, but it's a quadratic, right? You get x squared plus 2x equals 15. Well, I don't know. It's about the same way. The only difference is we could say we could multiply this by x, and this by x, like I did the last one. But do you agree it's still multiplying by x out in front, or multiplying each one by x? You get the same answer. Yeah. But we don't use x for multiply anymore, so that's why it's okay to use x.
Yeah, sometimes
When do you use x for multiplying?
I still use it sometimes. Every time I write a multiplication.
You don't write it on my test, or I would mark it wrong. Like if you have 2x plus 4, you say times x minus 3.
No, not that.
It's easier to do 5x.
When do you write 5 times 4 on your paper?
Okay, well, like, what if I'm doing 12 times 8 here?
Let's try not to get that.
How am I going to solve this?
Yeah, you're not far.
We could complete the square here. I'm a big factoring fan, so I always try to factor first. But complete the square is kind of set up for that, right? So what do you want to do? Factor or complete the square?
It's really easy.
If you subtract
5 negative 3.
15 over, yeah, I love the factor.
Oh, yeah.
I like factoring even more than I like doing this stuff. So I'm always going to factor if I can factor it. Because 5 times 3 is 15, plus 5 minus 3. So I would get x equals negative 5, x equals 3. Should get the same answer if you complete the square or do the quadratic formula. Make sure you check your answers. And by check your answers, I don't mean plug it in to make sure it works, but make sure that these answers do not make this problem undefined. And it's usually pretty easy to tell what would be the one number that would make this problem undefined. I didn't get 0, so that means these answers are okay. Well, that's because the last one didn't have an x in the bottom, so we didn't have to check it. All right? All right, let's get a little more complicated. Those are too easy. Yeah, we're just baby steps today. This is not bad. It's still fun.
No, it's not bad, but it gets worse.
Not much worse. The worst part, I think, is today is they don't all factor, so sometimes you have to do complete the square, do the quadratic formula, which isn't that much fun, I don't think. You have two options on this. One option is you could get a common denominator here, and then you could multiply the denominator over, and it always works. I don't like that way. I like to say, what's my common denominator? Multiply everything by the common denominator, and then your fractions cancel out. And so that's the way I'm going to do it. I'm not opposed to you getting a common denominator and simplifying it that way, because it still works. But my advice is I like to find my common denominator first. So you have to remember that you can't break up addition and subtraction, though. So when you have stuff like this, we definitely have an x minus 3 that's going to go in our common denominator. But x is separate from x minus 3. So you have to take every factor the least number of times that it appears, if that makes any sense. This one just has 1, so we don't have to worry about it. If it had an x plus 2, we'd have to take that also. If you get your common denominator correctly, when you go through and multiply everything by your common denominator, you should get your fractions to cancel out. So I like to show my work. Some people just know what's going to cancel out. But going to multiply this by x times x minus 3. I'm going to multiply this times x minus 3. And I'm going to multiply this times x minus 3. And my next step should have no fractions, or I've done something wrong. Because now I can go through and I can cancel these x's out, and I would just be left with x minus 3. On this one, I can cancel out x minus 3, but pay attention that that's a minus sign, so that's minus 2x. On the other side, nothing cancels out, so I'm going to distribute that 4x and get 4x squared minus 12x. With me on that? Some people, like, I don't like the way people do this because I feel like they're not really doing the math, but they know what's going to cancel out, so they only multiply by what's missing from the bottom. I'm not a big fan of that, but it works. I always do it like this. This is another quadratic, which means I'm going to get equal to 0 and see if maybe I can factor, and then if not, I'm going to...
Does x minus 3 have to be like in a parentheses and then minus 2x, or can it just all be written out as one thing?
It's all one of them.
Like, because you're writing it like this, minus 2x times x minus 3. Like that? Is that what you mean?
That's like, it's the first part of like, so
Oh, well, you can't break it up into fractions. So once you get rid of the fraction, it's just all together. Okay, so you just have to keep it separate, like when it's in a fraction. Does that make sense to me? Yeah. Okay, I'm with you. She was saying now that we, like up here, do I have to keep this separate from this? Once you get rid of a fraction, you can just combine like terms. So you really just have negative x minus 3 equals 4x squared minus 12x. So I can add x, I can add 3, and I get 4x squared minus 11x plus 3. You with me on that? Again, you can try to factor it. Some people hate the factor by grouping when there's a number in front, so you can do probably quadratic formula would be a better choice than the square here. So factor by grouping definitely works on this one, right? Oh, it looks like it works, but I bet it's wrong because of the sign, right? Let's check. It looks like it works because 4 times 3 is 12. Well, multiplies give you 12, that adds to give you 11. Doesn't work because you need to subtract, right? So it looks like we're completing the, or I'm not completing the square. I'm going to do the quadratic formula. Here's the great thing about the quadratic formula. I don't have to check my answers because there's no way that I get the quadratic formula is going to make an extraneous solution. But the bad thing is you have to do the quadratic formula. So negative b, so that would become positive 11. B squared, I'm going to go ahead and say that's 121. Minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a.
You mean you can't do that?
I could, but I just choose not to.
Yeah, very certain.
Even better, do I have to break up the square root of 73? Can it break up? Which means that is my answer, that ugliness. A lot of them work out nicely, but some of them don't. So just be aware that you might have to do the quadratic formula or complete the square on your homework. Yep, that's it. That ugly answer is what makes that equation true. Let's do another one. It's an undershirt, right? My husband always wears undershirts. I don't know. I think if you start wearing it, you just always do.
I never wear them.
Yeah, I never wear them. The only time I wear an undershirt is when I'm like dressing shirt. And that's just because you can see where you're dressing.
Yeah.
I don't wear them.
This is a sweatshirt.
He always wears them. Like we have an undershirt for. Okay, here's the important part about this stuff. We want to find the least common denominator. So if you just say your common denominator is x plus 1 and x squared plus x, you're not finding the least common denominator, and you're actually going to create this big ugly mess of a problem. So if you can factor the denominators, you want to do that first, Because notice on this one, if you factor an x out, you see how they both have an x plus 1 in them already? So you don't need to take two of them for your common denominator. You just need to take one, because it's here once and it's here once. So make sure if you can factor your denominators that you do that. So what would my least common denominator be on this? I need an x, and I need an x plus 1. Right? It's the least one because I only need one of these. Although it's in two different ones, it's each one there only one time. Alright, because the problem is people don't factor, and then they get like x cubed in their problem, and then they have to do a whole lot of awful work to get to the answer. Alright? So I'm going to go through and just multiply everything by that, and I like to just squish it up here next to the problem. So I say x times x plus 1, x times x plus 1, x times x plus 1. So I get 2x squared plus 2x on that one, if I distribute that correctly. This one, my x plus 1's cancel out, so I just get minus 1x equals, this whole thing cancels out, and I think I just get 1 over there. You with me on that? Maybe? So is that 2x squared plus x minus 1? Do you have a question on how I'm getting that? And again, you have options. If you don't want to try to factor it, and you want to do the quadratic formula or complete the square, promise it always works. I think this one actually does work to factor it, because I could say what multiplies to give me negative 2 that subtracts to give me positive 1 would be positive 2x minus 1x. You agree with me on that? Because I have to
Oh, yeah.
do the factor by grouping. If you don't like factor by grouping, just do the quadratic formula. Gonna come up here and finish that. But I think I get factor out of 2x, and I get x plus 1. Factor out of negative 1, I get x plus 1. You have to see if it makes your problem undefined, right? So you don't necessarily have to plug them in, but you should be able to look at your answers and look up at your denominators and say, are either one of those going to make me have an undefined problem when I plug in? Yeah, negative 1 is a problem, right? Because I have an asymptote at negative 1, which means this is an example of an extraneous solution that you would have to cancel out and just get x equals 1/2. And so that's what I mean by, because it's like if you plug negative 1 up here, you agree you'd get 2 minus 1 over 0? Because you'd get negative 1 plus 1? You see what I'm saying? So when you plug it in, it's undefined, which means it's not a solution to that problem. It's extraneous. It's kind of like those square root problems. You just have to remember to check your answers, because sometimes they don't work. Questions about that? Maybe. Basically, as long as you factor. I think I have, let's see what I have. I have one that we're going to use the clickers for. I don't know if it's the next one yet or not. Let's see. Oh, I have this one first, and then we'll do the clickers. What?
Guess what my grade is for the engineering class?
Hey, you go ahead.
No. It's a 67%.
How come you had an A on your clicker?
Well, it was an A for the last 9 weeks, and then our first grade that we had for this 9 weeks was a test that I got 67 on.
Write this down.
Yeah, mine is a real test, 67.
When are your drop-off class?
Mr. Gardner told me to wait till Christmas, because then I get the credit.
So it's like a fragment. It's like a Christmas one, right?
Yeah, I guess it is. Yeah, I could have thought of that.
This one, usually what happens, not always, but usually people figure out pretty quickly that the other side's equal sign factors into the two factors on the other side. Makes things really nice, right? 5 times 2 plus 5 minus 2. And again, least common denominator means you only have to take one x plus 5 and 1x minus 2 as your common denominator, because it just appears one time in each thing. And then it's just multiplying and canceling stuff out. You gotta admit, it's kind of fun.
It's satisfying.
It is, I agree. My husband, when he was in college and he was doing all this stuff, he would hate when he would do this whole problem and then he'd get an answer of like 1 or 0. He'd be like, how do I do all that work? And it's just 1. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I did all that work and it's just 1. It's very conflicting feelings about those types of problems. Because he hated it. Like he's okay if he got like 7. But like if he got 1 or 0, like he hated that was the answer because he just wasn't a big fan of it. Or if both your answers are extraneous and the answer's no solution. He really hated that. But that's why he's a math teacher, I guess. I'm going to show some extra work this one. The x minus 2 cancel, so I get plus x plus 5. I don't know why it's that big, so that's okay. And then this side, everything cancels, and you get 7. Minus 5x, and then if we subtract 7 over, we get minus 2. And again, if you like factoring, a lot of these are factorable. If you really hate that factor by grouping, then you might just end up doing the quadratic formula. But I think this one's factorable as well, which I think is why I love these problems even more, because I love factoring. I love canceling stuff out. It's just too good to not like there. Right, what multiplies to give you 6, that subtracts to give you -5. -6 constant one, right? I got 2 and -1/3. Did you get that? Are those both the answers?
No.
No.
2 does not work. So -1/3 is your only answer. All right, I'm gonna pass out the clickers right quick. Sorry.
Yes.
There's 1-year-old who is split. And her grandpa is there helping you. He doesn't stop. I really like Mark, but he doesn't like make her
Oh my god.
any big searching.
Does not work out.
Would you like me to like pass them out?
No good.
No. Town, and like music, and they kind of like have like a lesson and their songs. Gala.
All right, so step 1, just like we did before.
3.
Sure, pass one back. Press down the power button. Hold it down, and you need to join Dixon. And if it says no, Dixon not found, search classes, search, and it'll find Dixon, and then try again. I'm gonna give you a new ID, so don't worry. Let me get to this next one real quick so I can start this. Hold on. Get to your ID, and then we'll get there, okay? Give me a second. Let's see if I can get this. Okay. Here is your IDs, kids. I changed them from before because somehow I erased everything. So here's your name. Find your name and your number. That's your ID, and it should say your name afterward. If it says Dixon not found, you're still having trouble, let me know.
Somebody could log into my account and like mess with my stuff.
No one's going to care that much to log into your account and mess with your account.
Oh, I didn't even notice those things.
And that's what it's like.
Everybody have their number?
Wait, if we were all on base and all submitted an answer, would it just count as the last person since we're one account trying to
I think it only would let one person log in at a time. So if you logged in, like we are more mature than this, but in Ms. Vi's class, some kids log in as different kids and answer wrong, so then that person gets the wrong answer.
Exactly what I was thinking.
It's exactly what's going to make us not use these, which will be thousands of dollars down the drain for kids being irresponsible and immature.
I don't know if you can sign up.
on why kids just ruin everything.
That's rude. We break everything.
So you actually still have to write some stuff down, but then the idea is you should be able to, it should say number 1 next to, after you're logged in, because I started this question, you should be able to find the answer here and then hit A, B, C, or D, or 1, 2, 3, or 4, and you have to enter twice. Like you enter it, and then you have to confirm that that's the real answer that you want, and then it'll say review, and that's how you know you're done. We'll take a few minutes, and we'll see if we all get this, so I know whether or not we're ready for the homework. And if we all miss it, that means I need to do more examples. Right? That's the idea of these, not to have you just make other kids get wrong answers. See, in calculus, they were like, so you can keep track of this? So can this count as a quiz grade for us? Like, they were so excited about it. And you guys are just like, let's make the other kids get the wrong answer.
No, we just put it down for California.
No, you can't. I think you can only log in 1 at a time.
Can we try it?
Maybe after we're done with it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think she.
But I don't think it would like it. But it might. Then you could all guess for Mason, and then Mason will have, like, the thing is, it keeps track of how many questions you've answered. So if you all log in as Mason, Mason will have like 30 questions to answer. And the rest of you would have none. So that's another way that I would know if people did it. Like, if you logged in as someone else and answered for them, and it let you, and you never logged in as yourself, then it would be easy to track who is messing up other people's grades. Because it keeps track of all your answers you've ever answered. And it shows a little chart, like I make a little line graph of whether you got it right or wrong, and if the class got it by the average right or wrong.
So I would be the average.
Maybe it's like you do this wrong thing, maybe it's the answer.
Is anybody getting an answer to it? I'm pretty sure it's right.
Wait, no.
Answer whenever you're ready. That's why I went ahead and started it. Because see, like I can look up here, and I can see that 2 of 12 students have answered.
Oh, really?
And I can even see who isn't finished. And we can make the one person that hasn't answered like feel terrible when it.
I don't like that.
Isn't that awful?
I don't like that.
No, it's okay. You're supposed to work it out. But when it gets down to like 1 or 2 people left,
Oh,
sometimes
wait,
I like
that's
to see
right.
who's left to see if they need it.
That's why
But it doesn't show your answers on here. But I can look it up.
Yeah, I know. I gotta.
They should make like a chart, like a pie chart.
I felt like the answers the most.
I don't know, but
I don't know if I
What
answered.
you get? Oh no, I messed up.
Did I go back?
Okay.
It's
I
typed in my first three
So
answers.
it says review. If you hit enter twice, you can't change it.
But it didn't.
So like, what else has reviews got? Because see, look, now there's 9 of 12 students.
I forgot my name.
It's
Por favor.
Now I feel stupid.
I got
Don't
you.
look. What caused them to?
Oh, this trying. No,
No matter what the answer is.
I did it wrong in this time.
So have you ever submitted
That
an
sucks.
No, he didn't get the right answer. Remember, he said he did it and none of his answers matched, so he had to redo it. Unlike Mason. Mason didn't get the right answer either, so he just guessed.
I didn't guess. It was like, I'm gonna say.
Educated guess.
And it was
About time.
So then, 66% of you said D is the right answer. 8%, I think that's one person, said B is the right answer. And 25% said C is the right answer.
Yeah, it's wrong.
Yeah, I think we didn't do so well.
Hey, I know the right answer.
What's the right answer?
This factor is x minus 2 and x plus 1, right? So,
That's what two more
That was the
times.
one part I thought I got.
2 minus 2. Yeah, minus 2 equals 0.
you can't have 2. 2 is not an answer because 2 is extraneous. So it's not A and it's not B, that's for sure.
Oh.
X minus 2 times x plus 1.
How is it not D?
It's not. It's not.
See? Yes, it is. This is
consensus? I'm working it out so we can check to see that we're doing this right, kids.
It's minus.
Plus 5x plus 5 equals 15.
I want to redo that, Robbie.
And then minus 15 over would be minus 10.
You put B.
Don't call anyone out, Mason.
I put D. I thought you were the one who put D.
What?
So this would be negative 6x plus 5x. You with me on that?
Yeah.
So I can factor 3x out and get x minus 2, and factor a 2 out and get a 5 out and get x minus 2. Just ignore all that. I think it should be x minus 2 and 3x plus 5.
So it would be 50.
Yes, yeah, I
Let's just
Hold on.
the minority.
Oh, yeah.
We were.
Yeah.
I told you.
It is B. I agree.
This is right. It says right here. This is right.
It says C's right?
Yeah.
Oh, failure.
Did we get the things mixed
Oh,
up?
yeah, they told me I'm wrong.
Very good. Answers for C and D swap.
D is right, so we're all good.
Everybody.
Except for that 25 and 10%.
D is right, so we're good. 66% of us got it right. Just ignore your answers here. Here, look, let's fix this.
Well, you're wrong.
Answer key.
But it said.
So you mean you messed up the first time you did the problem?
No, it just means I clicked the wrong answer over here.
Or you messed up the problem.
No, Lily, look.
Guys, everyone makes mistakes.
It does, it's true. But I was trying to be really good teacher yesterday and put these in all my notes. So I was like hurriedly making all these questions and making up the multiple choice, which my notes don't have multiple choice in them. So I'm just trying to hurry up and do it. And then half of them I forgot to click the right answer. Like in calculus, I didn't even click the right answer. So none of them said they were right because I forget to go back and click it. So I just clicked the wrong one. But you're right. C's right. C's right. We're good. Failure of clickers today.
Alright. I think we should do this
Look at
instead
that.
of like actually.
Hold this down to turn it off, and then I'll get
We have to sign out.
No, it'll sign you out when you hold it down.
Can we try to log into one
Try
account?
logging into Mason.
Yeah.
I can be the original Mason.
What's your number, Mason?
I'm logging first. 22.
Okay. Unable to sign.
Unable to sign in.
I'm able to sign this. Let's see, only let one person sign in.
Oh, that's dumb.
If someone
Next
gets
time
their
you
first
sign in,
name,
Ha, I got in.
Under Mason.
Oh, I thought you did.
Hold your power button down and I'll get it.
Oh, hey, Emily. You're on the scene and be like,
Shut up. Alright, so let's actually work on some homework, kids. You guys are out of control.
everybody, all day.
That's really disappointing.
It's not made so that people count all log in as a single person.
Do you have an ID on these?
Do I?
Yeah.
That's not what I think it is.
Well, you just wanted to get a game and wanted to compete with us.
I don't need to compete with. I would make the game up. I would make the game.
Okay. I was on the game show, The Chase. We could do that, but we can't. It has this like,
Let me see.
it's this guy with an IQ of 155, except on one side, and then with the
Oh, I saw that advertised, yeah.
It's pretty.